My brother's wedding had 240 guests. I know because I counted the chairs while I was setting them up. I was the one who rented the venue. I was the one who wired the deposit. And when the night was over, and the fairy lights came down, and my brother carried his new wife across the threshold of the suite I had quietly paid for, I drove home alone and sat in my car in the parking garage for 20 minutes before I could make myself go inside. That was June. By August, I had made a decision that would change everything. But I am getting ahead of myself. My name does not matter for this story. What matters is that I am the middle child, 31 years old, a logistics coordinator for a mid-sized shipping company in Charlotte, North Carolina. I am the one in my family who learned early that love was something you earned, and the currency it accepted was sacrifice. My brother is 4 years older than me. Growing up, he was the golden one, the athlete. The one my father drove 2 hours each way to watch play Friday night football, while I stayed home with my younger sister and heated up whatever my mother had left in the oven before she went to cheer him on too. I do not say this with bitterness anymore. I say it because you need to understand the foundation before you can understand how high the walls got built. My sister is 3 years younger than me. She was always the baby, the soft one, the one who cried easily and got comforted immediately and never had to ask twice for anything. I was the middle, the one who figured things out. The one who did not cry because there was no point. Our father passed away when I was 22. He left behind a small life insurance policy, a truck that needed a new transmission, and a storage unit full of fishing gear nobody wanted. He also left behind my mother, who had never worked a full-time job, and 2 adult children, who immediately looked at me when the lawyer finished reading and said, quietly but clearly, that the estate was not large enough to cover existing debts. I had a job. I had a small apartment. I had a savings account I had been building since I was 16, and working weekends at a garden center. I was the practical one, the one who knew how to stretch $1 and still make it feel like 2. Within 3 months of my father's death, I was helping my mother cover her mortgage gap. Within 6 months, I had co-signed a personal loan for my brother, so he could start what he called his business, a landscaping operation, that mostly consisted of him buying equipment and taking contracts he could not always complete on time. Within a year, I had my name on 3 financial documents I had not planned to sign, attached to people who had never once asked me if I was okay. Have you ever been the one who holds everything together, not because anyone asked, not because you volunteered, but simply because you were the one who would? Because you were the one who understood that if you did not, no one would? And the longer you did it, the more invisible the doing became? That is where I was. Every month. For 7 years. My brother met his wife at a gym. She is not a bad person. I want to be clear about that. She is simply someone who came into a family dynamic already in motion and never questioned the direction it was traveling. She assumed I helped because I wanted to. She assumed the cosigns and the deposits and the wire transfers were gestures of love freely given. She was not wrong about the love. She was wrong about the freely. When my brother told me he was proposing, I was happy for him. Genuinely. I sat across from him at a diner on a Tuesday afternoon, and I smiled and I meant it, and I said I could not wait to be there when he asked her. He laughed and punched my arm lightly, and then said, almost as an afterthought, that he was thinking about upgrading the landscaping equipment before the wedding season, and did I think I could help with the financing again? I said I would look into it. That night I went home and opened a spreadsheet I had been keeping for 2 years. Not because I was planning anything, just because I am the kind of person who tracks things. In 2 years, I had contributed $43,000 in direct financial support across my mother, my brother, and twice to my sister, when her landlord raised the rent and she called me crying. $43,000. That was not counting the cosigns, which carried their own risk weight I had never put a number to out loud. I closed the spreadsheet and went to bed and told myself it was fine. That is what I always did. I told myself it was fine, and that families help each other, and that I was lucky to be in a position to help, and that one day it would be different. The engagement party was at my mother's house. I helped clean the house the day before. I brought food. I hung the lights on the back porch. I made sure there was enough ice. When everyone arrived and my brother walked in with his arm around his soon-to-be wife, my mother cried happy tears, and my sister squealed. And I stood near the kitchen doorway and watched and felt something I did not have a word for yet. During the party, my brother's wife's family arrived. Her parents, her two sisters, her aunt and uncle. They were warm, cheerful people from outside Raleigh. Her mother hugged everyone. Her father shook hands and laughed easily. At one point, her older sister pulled me aside to ask how close my brother and I were, and I said very close, and she smiled and said that was so nice, that her family was the same way, that she and her sister did everything together. And I smiled back and nodded and excused myself to refill the chip bowl. 2 weeks later, my brother called me to talk about the wedding. He said he and his wife had been thinking about what kind of celebration they wanted, and they had decided on something big. 200+ guests. A venue outside the city. Late June. Outdoor ceremony. Indoor reception. He said the venue they loved had a deposit requirement of $8,000, due within 30 days to hold the date. He paused. I said, "What do you need from me?" He said he was between accounts right now with the business, and my mother did not have liquid savings, and his wife's family was contributing what they could, but the gap was the deposit and the first vendor payments, and he thought maybe I could help bridge it. I asked how much the bridge was. He said around $14,000 to start. I did not say anything for a moment. I looked out my apartment window at the parking lot below and watched a woman load groceries into her car and thought about how ordinary that looked. How simple. I said okay. Why didn't I say no? That is the question I see in the comments every time I tell any part of this story, and I have thought about it enough to have an actual answer. It is not because I was a pushover. It is not because I did not know my own worth. It is because there is a particular kind of conditioning that happens when you grow up as the capable one in a family that depends on your capability. Saying no did not just mean saying no. It meant becoming the reason the wedding did not happen. It meant being the one who let the family down. And I had spent 31 years making sure I was never that person. Stopping felt like becoming someone I did not recognize. So I wired the deposit. I paid the first vendor. I co-signed the venue contract because my brother's credit had 2 flags on it from the equipment loan. My name was on the contract for a wedding I had not been asked to be in. That detail took a few weeks to fully surface. When my brother told me the wedding party had been finalized, he mentioned it almost the same way he had mentioned the equipment loan as a postscript, after the main conversation had already moved on. He said his wife had 3 sisters, and she wanted all 3 as bridesmaids, and he had his 2 best friends and his college roommate as groomsmen, and it was a clean, even number, and the photos would look nice. I said, "That sounds great." He said, "Yeah, we are really happy with it." I said, "So where will I be?" He said I would be with family, at the family table, and that it was going to be a beautiful night. I sat with that for a few days. I told myself it was not a big deal, that plenty of siblings were not in the wedding party, that the wedding was about him and his wife, and not about me. I made a list of reasons it was fine, and I read that list every morning for about a week. Then the seating chart was sent out. The family table was table 4. I know because I looked up the venue floor plan and counted from the front. The head table where my brother and his wife and the wedding party sat was table 1. My mother was at table 2, with my brother's wife's parents and her aunt and uncle. My sister was also at table 2. I found my name at table 4, between a cousin I had met twice and my brother's college roommate's wife, who I did not know at all. Table 2 was the family table. Table 4 was where they had put me. I called my mother. I asked her if she had seen the seating chart. She said yes. I asked her if she had noticed where I was placed. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said that there had been limited space at table 2, and that I would have fun at table 4, because the roommate's wife was apparently very nice. I said, "Mom, I paid for this venue." She said, "I know you did, honey, and we all appreciate that so much." And then she changed the subject to the centerpieces. The wedding was beautiful. I will not take that away. The outdoor ceremony was everything my brother had described, and his wife was genuinely radiant, and when he cried at the altar, I felt it in my chest, because that part was real, and it was mine. That is the part that made everything else so hard. Because I loved him. I still love him. And love was exactly how they kept the door open. At the reception, I sat at table 4, and I smiled, and I drank my champagne, and I watched my mother give a toast from table 2 about how proud she was of the family she had built. She thanked my brother's wife's parents by name. She thanked the bridesmaids by name. She mentioned my sister by name when she talked about a funny story from my brother's childhood. She did not say my name. After the toast, my brother's roommate's wife leaned over to me and said, "Are you a friend of the family?" And I said yes, something like that. I drove home that night, and I did not cry. I opened my laptop, and I pulled up the venue contract, the one with my name on it, and I read every line. And then I opened a new document, and I started writing down numbers. What I had put in. What I had signed for. What I was still technically liable for, if any vendor filed a claim. Then I opened another tab, and I searched for a family law attorney in Charlotte. Not because I had a plan, just because I needed to understand what my options were. The same way I had always needed to understand the shape of a thing before I could decide what to do about it. The attorney I found specialized in financial disputes between family members. Her name was on a firm website that was plain and professional, and had no stock photos of happy handshakes, which I appreciated. I sent an email that night explaining the situation broadly, and asking about a consultation. She replied the next morning. We met on a Thursday, in a small office on the 4th floor of a building near uptown. She was direct and clear, and did not waste time. She looked at the documents I brought: the venue contract, the co-signed paperwork from the equipment loan, the wire transfer records, and she asked me what outcome I was looking for. I said I was not sure yet. I said I wanted to know what I was actually holding. She told me. The equipment loan co-sign was the most significant exposure. My brother had made payments inconsistently. There were 2 late notices in the past 18 months that had not been disclosed to me. If he defaulted, I was on the hook for the remaining balance, which was just over $19,000. The venue contract was fully executed and would expire naturally in 60 days once the final vendor invoices cleared, but my signature was there for any disputes that arose before then. She said, in plain terms, "You are currently carrying a significant amount of financial liability for people who seated you at table 4 at a wedding you funded." I almost laughed. I said, "When you put it that way." She said, "How do you want to put it?" I went home and I thought for 3 weeks. What I decided was not revenge. I want to be clear about that. What I decided was an exit. A careful, documented, legal exit from a financial arrangement that had never been a fair one. The goal was not to hurt anyone. The goal was to stop hurting myself. I started with the equipment loan. I contacted the lender directly and requested a full account history and the process for removing a cosigner. The lender explained that my brother would need to refinance in his name alone or find another cosigner. I sent my brother a letter, not a phone call. A letter. Because I had learned from my attorney that written communication was cleaner, informing him that I intended to pursue removal from the loan and that he had 90 days to arrange refinancing. He called me within an hour of receiving it. He did not start with the loan. He started with how I had been acting strange since the wedding, and how his wife had noticed, and how it was putting a cloud over their first months of marriage. He said I needed to let things go and be happy for him. He said the seating chart was not a big deal and I was being oversensitive. I said, "I am not calling about the seating chart." He said, "Then what is this about?" I said, "It is about the loan. I need my name removed. I need you to refinance within 90 days. I am not angry. This is not punishment. I need my financial exposure reduced because I have been carrying too much for too long and it needs to change." He said, "You are doing this now, right after my wedding?" I said, "I am doing this now, because now is when I decided to." He said my mother was going to be devastated. He said my sister was going to be upset. He said I was blowing up the family over a seating chart. I said, "I told you this is not about the seating chart." He hung up. Within 48 hours my mother called. She was not angry exactly. She was disappointed in the particular way she had always been disappointed in me, which was quiet and soft and somehow heavier than yelling. She said she did not understand why I was doing this. She said my brother was under a lot of stress with the new marriage and the business, and pulling the rug out from under him financially was not something a loving sister did. I said, "Mom, do you know what my exposure is on that loan if he defaults?" She said she was sure he would not default. I said, "I am sure he will try not to, but I am not willing to bet $19,000 on trying." She said, "It is not like that." I said, "It is exactly like that. I have loved you all my whole life, and I have shown it in every way I knew how, and I need you to understand that what I am asking for is not cruelty. I am asking to not be the only person in this family who carries risk." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said she would talk to my brother. 3 days later, my sister called. She said I was being cold. She said I had changed. She said something about how the old me would never have done this, and I thought, the old me co-signed a loan I was never asked about, and paid for a wedding I was not included in, and sat at table 4 with someone I had never met. And I said, I think the old me was always doing things that were not good for me, and I am trying to do things differently now. My sister said, "So you are just deciding not to care about us anymore?" I said, "I am deciding to care about myself at the same level I care about you. That is different." She did not have an answer for that. We stayed on the phone in silence for about 10 seconds, and then she said she had to go. My brother did not refinance in 90 days. He asked for an extension. I gave him 30 more days. He came back at day 28 and said the bank had not approved his application without a cosigner because of the late payment history. He said he needed more time. He said he was working on it. I said, "I understand. I am still going to notify the lender that I am formally requesting to be released and that I have documented my written notice to you." He said, "You cannot do that without my consent on the account." I said, "I have already spoken with the lender. They confirmed the process. Your consent is not required for me to initiate the removal request. It requires you to refinance, which you have said you are working on. I am simply beginning my side of the process." The silence on the phone lasted long enough that I checked to see if the call had dropped. He said, "I cannot believe you are doing this to me." I said, "I need you to hear me clearly. I paid $14,000 toward your wedding. I have been contributing to this family financially for 7 years. I was seated at the 4th table at an event I funded with my own savings. I was not in your wedding. My name was not in your mother's toast. I am not leaving this family. I am leaving an arrangement that was never fair, and I need you to understand that those are two different things." He did not respond. I heard him breathing. Then he said, quietly, that he did not know the toast had not included me. I said, "It did not." He said he was sorry about that. I said, "Thank you." We stayed on the phone a little longer after that. It was not a resolution. It was not forgiveness or reckoning or a turning point, exactly. It was just two people who had been moving in the same broken pattern for a long time, and one of them had finally said out loud that the pattern was broken. I am telling you this, not because the story has a clean ending. It does not. My brother is still refinancing. My mother still calls, and sometimes there is a stiffness in her voice that was not there 2 years ago. My sister and I are in a careful, gentle period of rebuilding that I do not take for granted. But I sleep differently now. I make financial decisions that are mine. I have started a savings account that does not have anyone else's name attached to it, and every month when the automatic deposit goes in, I feel something I did not have a word for at the beginning of this story. I have one now. The word is mine.